Are you sure? Okay. First, we're just going to go over the meeting rules. I'm sorry. I should ask everybody to hold any questions or comments. So pay attention. Whoever has the floor, let's give them their space. Do not dominate the discussion or have side conversations. Please state your name and affiliation when speaking. Listen to and respect other points of view. Participate and ask questions to seek clarification. Make comments at a microphone. And put your phones and pagers on silent during the meeting so that we can all be present. Anybody have any questions about the meeting rules for today? All right. Anybody have any questions about the agenda in front of you? What the plan is? First thing that we're going to do is get you guys a committee chair. And so we'll open the floor to nominations and we'll hold a vote. Yes, sir.
Gil?
I nominate.
We're not there yet. I know what you want to do. Hang on. After that, we'll go into committee discussion. I want you guys to walk out of here with a clear focus about what this committee is really going to work on. So I'd like you to try and define a scope, something that we can take back to DOE and say, yes, this is exactly what we're working on and this is where our focus is going to be. Identify some of the key issues if we can. Some of the points that you want to make sure that you get some information from DOE on. What are your real questions? See if we can define a schedule as well. Find out at the very least what the next committee meeting is going to be for you, if not the next several. And we'll identify if there's any obstacles that we need to address and go from there. Any questions about the agenda? All right. Everybody okay with moving into chair elections? All right, let's do that. Are there any nominations for committee chair? Gil.
I nominate Tom French chair. Second.
All right. Tom, will you accept that nomination?
I will.
Okay. Is there anybody else that would like to be nominated? Seeing none, do I need to pass out ballots or do we feel okay doing this as just a hand vote? Hand vote. All those in favor of Tom?
Tom, you didn't vote for yourself.
4, 5, 6. Please, Tom.
All 7? So, anybody voting for no one? No? Okay. All right. Tom, congratulations.
Thank you. How about
Thank you.
Do we elect a vice chair?
You can appoint somebody, yes.
Okay, I appoint Gil.
Done. All right. And, all right. So with that, you have your chair and committee chair. We'll put those very tiny ballots off to the side since we won't need those. I also gave you made sure that we had copies of the proposal in front of you, and this is what what was approved by the board for you to work on. It's still, to some degree, a little bit broad, so I wanted to see if we could narrow that down and get a real idea where you wanted to focus on. Tom, I know that this was a charge that you wanted to lead. Do you have any ideas on?
Well, when Gil and I put the proposal together, we tried to identify first what we needed to learn, and that's incorporated in these bullets in the proposal. And so I think the first thing we need to do is arrange a meeting or 2 meetings where we can cover all these with the expert, whoever DOE thinks are the experts in these areas, to come in and give us background. The one thing I left off that should be added is we really need a recount of what DOE has done so far. I mean, I know that there's been a lot of efforts, a lot of studies, and it would be nice to know, after we've learned all this stuff, what they've done to date. And then the purpose of this committee was to understand if there is a balance that can be struck between EM scope and funding the pension plan, and what are the various options out there. They look, on the surface, it looks very like it's black and white, so they're mutually exclusive. But I believe there are ways that maybe they aren't, but I think we have to get a lot smarter to understand that. There are options. You can not fund the pension at all, fund all mission, or you can do the opposite, right? Or you can say fund, and I'm saying this out of ignorance, right. You can fund the pension to 90% instead of 100%. Or you can look at other missions that may be collapsing and try and get money diverted from somebody, some other mission in the complex that's collapsing is no longer useful, but the money may have been allocated. So I think there's some options that this committee can explore to go look at that kind of stuff.
Okay.
So I think that should be our mission, is to go evaluate what those alternatives are and which one looks the most positive.
And
Gil?
piggybacking off what Tom's saying, and I wholeheartedly agree, you know, at the July Strategic and Legacy Management Committee.
Can you bring that a little bit closer?
I'm sorry.
I know that we can all hear you in the room. It really is just so that we make sure our recording is good.
I got you.
Thank you.
You know, I agree everything with what Tom just shared, but going back to that July committee meeting, the Strategic and Legacy Management site manager Jack Craig stood up and said he was going to give us as much support as and much information as he's allowed to. I mean, I don't know, legally is probably too strong a word, but he stood up in front of the committee and said, hey, whatever you ask for, I'm going to get you. So you know, as we leave this meeting, and I mean, I know as Tom and I have talked about it, yours going back and what have you done so far is a fair question, and to get a report kind of from DOE.
So is that the first question?
I really think that the educational bullets are first, so that when they give us an answer, we would understand the context. But the pension structure is very important because it's not a DOE pension. It's the contractor's pension.
Right.
And so it's not mandated by federal law or anything. And understanding that relationship between DOE and the contractor and the pension and the obligations, I think, are very important to understand up front.
And that's where we need to make sure that we're careful with this committee, that we stay where DOE can act, because that's who you make your recommendations
Right,
to.
absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Bob?
Bob Dorcap. Tom, you're making a lot of sense, and I agree with you for the most part. I think that education, which is what you're talking about, is really the key, because you know, when Gil Allensworth first developed a recommendation, you know, I think it made a lot of sense. It raised a lot of issues. That's why we're here now with an ad hoc committee. And but I think it's education will be very important, because you know, you got money being spent on scope of work. You've got money being spent on pensions. You know, I think Tom French in particular knows more than the rest of us do in terms of how the money is kind of flowing through the EM budget. But we need to get up to speed. You know, this committee individually needs to get up to speed so that we all kind of get up to Tom's level. And you know, this idea that you know, the money is not, it's the contractor's pension responsibility. Is it ERISA? Is it not ERISA? Is it DOE's responsibility? I want to know more before I make any recommendation or.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts? So you're saying education. I see up here, you're talking about really those first 2 or 3 main bullets and the related sub-bullets. Is that what you mean when you say education?
Yes. With the addition of, after we learn all that, what has DOE done to date, so that we don't make recommendations they may have already done.
Okay.
Tom, help me out. Who's Buck Consultants?
It's the company that calculates the pension requirements every year, and they've been doing it for many years. Many years. 90s. So they have the track record of what the pension investment must be, and
Well, I assume they're an actuarial firm?
yeah,
Oh, here, I'll pull it up.
they're a Xerox company, but that's what they produce every year.
Okay.
So in my vision would be that DOE would help us talk to the DOE experts and also the contractor experts that work under DOE's direction.
Okay.
Because there's a lot of interaction between the department and the contractors on how this whole thing works. And then there's a board that actually manages the fund, which works with the contractor. But DOE has purview on how that's put together and managed. So understanding all that interplay, I think, will be very important, James.
So it seems like those first two main bullets, that's what you're wanting to get from DOE right off the bat first.
I think even a little bit of baseline information regarding what is promised to the retirees, so maybe something out of their employee handbook as to what that pension looks like.
So what was promised to the,
Yeah. I guess even,
would you actually want to see, like, in writing out of the handbook, like, what the benefits plan was?
I think to get a firm understanding of what it is, how it's been promised and presented to the employees all along, 'cause I certainly wouldn't want to undermine some of the corporate kind of strategies that you could put on exiting a pension plan.
Okay.
So it would only be fair to understand the big picture before someone had the idea of, say, do a bare bones buyout, and that wouldn't be fair to them.
Bob?
Yes, I want to go back to the education piece again. I think, in listening to Tom French again, to get this committee up to speed, there's like a hierarchy here with DOE making decisions. There's been a contract with a company called Buck. What is it, Buck Associates or
Consultants.
Buck Consultants? At some point, listening to a presentation by Buck Associates might make some sense, but I think it's clear that we need to really understand the relationships and how things are done. This is a government type situation, so it's usually very complicated and convoluted. If you get like a DOE top-down explanation, then you'll drill down to the right people to talk to, in terms of how things are set up. Like you've got contractors, you've got an actuary, you've got employees that switch from different contractors but are promised pensions. We need someone right from the top to kind of like give us a kind of a top to bottom explanation of who, identify the right people to talk to.
So that DOE top level presentation would probably be the first thing that you would want to see.
Yeah, I mean,
and they may have to bring one of the SRS people in to give other details on how they fit together. I think it's very important to understand the rules and regulations, the laws, but then how the DOE and the contractor fits together.
Nina?
I agree with what Bob said, and I don't know if we could get that, like, on a sheet of paper, the hierarchy of how it looks. I guess my confusion comes from, so they request the money in the budget, and the money from the budget goes towards the pension, and then I guess DOE has their flexibility in where they've been spending it, and I guess I'm just confused about where the pension board comes in and what their responsibility would be as a board.
So they actually manage the fund, but we need to have a description of how that actually happens.
So they only manage what they get. They can't ask
Right.
for more. They're only managing what they have.
And then the Buck brothers are employed to say what the needs are. We need this to get to 100% coverage, and the board manages the fund.
So they can't ask for any more. They only have what they have.
Right.
Okay, that makes more sense.
So would you need to, outside of understanding just how things are set up, what kind of information would you want from them? And I'm asking because it seems like they have this layer of things that you can't impact with a recommendation because they can only deal with the money that they receive. And I don't think that there's a question that they mismanage the money. No, I don't think anyone has said
they're not
that.
Mismanage is a
anything.
dangerous word.
Yeah, for you that means that has a
dangerous word.
Ill-used.
that has meanings, doesn't it? Yeah.
It does. Yeah. I wasn't trying to be mean. I was just
No.
be careful with
I
this.
understand.
Go ahead.
Bob.
Buck Associates is in my opinion, a hired consultant, actuarial, to calculate future liabilities for a pension plan.
Okay.
So, they're probably the last ones we're going to talk to. What we need to understand from the beginning is, you got these contracted employees. They're not DOE employees, but in effect, it's the responsibility of DOE to provide them with some kind of pension because the government's paying for it. So if we can understand, the obligation at the government level down to the subcontractors, and then you have these people that are working for the subcontractors who are entitled to get a pension because they're doing government work on a contract basis. I don't want to sound like I already know what's going on, but that's why I'm saying if we get an explanation of that hierarchy, then what is the long-term commitment of the federal government, in my opinion? What would be the long-term commitment of the federal government to providing pension benefits to outside vendor contracted employees?
Well,
And then what would Buck Associates can say, well, based on the obligations that the U.S. government is taking on, then Buck Associates can say, well, here's what, based on current...
Buck works for the contractor. Buck doesn't work for DOE. So the contractor promulgates a budget, and in the budget, they say, based on Buck's analysis, we need this budget to go into pension. So it's a budget request that goes up. Then DOE has to decide if they have the money in the budget, if they get it from headquarters, Congress, flows back down to the contractor, but the contractor is actually managing everything.
See, again, that's a good education question. See, again, you know more than we do, Tom.
Well, that's why I would like to bring all these people in, and we can listen to them.
Because, and I know this through researching for the recommendation. I mean, DuPont owned the pension, so when the contract got changed to Westinghouse assumed it, and then when Westinghouse released, did continue, then SRS, pulled it up, SRS pulled it up, or whoever it was at that point. So, but it's good to hear it from the horse's mouth and understand exactly how those things happened. I agree with you, Bob. But yeah.
Well, Bob Doricab, I'd just like to make one more comment in terms of just hierarchy and understanding. I remember asking this question of DOE, not related to pensions, but it was last year. I think it was about employee recruitment and retention. And, it's just the basic question, why do you have all these contractors? Or why don't you have one contractor? Why don't you have three? Why do you have three? Why not four? Why not six? Why are you outsourcing this to begin with? And, and then, of course, DOE looked at me incredulously and was like, well, the answer is so obvious. This plant's not going to be in existence forever. And, we see like a long-term DOE. We hire contractors so that we don't have employees that are committed to the DOE payroll long term. So I thought, I listened to what okay, I understand that. But they have there's this pension relationship, which is a long-term obligation to people that work for Savannah Riverside. So we definitely going back again to what Tom said, I mean, we need some education to really understand how this relationship has been developed with the contracted employees and what the responsibilities are going forward.
Bobby.
Bobby Williams Camp. So I understand you to say that Buck Associates manages the pension. So,
No, they don't manage the pension. They just calculate what the pension needs.
okay. So they have been in this position from DuPont up until SRS.
They came on something.
During Westinghouse? Yeah, they came in sometime during Westinghouse.
I had a quick question earlier that I didn't understand. With the pension, is there a difference for different people hired at certain points as to how much contribution there is and how much they get back?
They change from defined benefits to defined contribution, so the new employees are on 401k kind of programs. And then you've got, what you've got is, this is all legacy, people that are approaching retirement or who have retired. And they represent this big liability that's sitting out there.
That would be good if we could get that kind of number. I'm sure that's really easy, just that clarity of who, 16,000, that was really easy.
Approximately, I mean,
Yeah.
give or take, it's 16,000.
And that's a definite number, right? That number can't increase.
No, it won't grow anymore.
Legacy.
Okay, so that's,
Legacy.
But that's the number of people on the pension total, not the number of people currently drawing off of it, right?
That's the ones that are, that either are on or could go on.
Okay.
And they have a number. I gotta quit asking Jim, but these are the kind of person we want to come testify and get us
Not
smarter.
explain it yet. But I'm just giving you the round
Yeah.
numbers, I mean, that I understand, so please don't take
no,
it
which is
back.
good because I wasn't quite sure if it was a flexible number, like if people in the next 5 years would be eligible for it or 20 years.
Yeah.
So this is pretty much what we're feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what it's referred to as limiting long-term liability. And so you got a fixed pool and they're gonna retire and start withdrawing their pension, already drawing their pension, then unfortunately, they're gonna pass away. So they're looking at a dwindling requirement to support the pension.
But Bob Dorcap, we've already, I think, was John Lopez at the last board meeting?
Yeah.
Presented a, kind of a, well, I'll call it the bell-shaped curve, although it's not a normal distribution, but it's the idea is that it ramps up and then it ramps down again based on mortality, because it's a legacy benefit. Obviously, what DOE is doing is what most corporations are doing in this country, is they're taking people, or they're not providing defined benefit contribution plans anymore. They're providing defined contribution plans. And, that's just, it's so hard to calculate and estimate what future benefits will be, or if you define what the benefits will be, but then you can't get the rate of return from invested funds to support that pension obligation. So that's how these businesses get in trouble. So, people will have to get smarter in the future with their own 401k funds or 403b funds or whatever the government calls their contribution to retirement. But you have to deal with these legacy people, and that's what, at least for the time that we're on the cab, we'd hate to see the scope of work reduced at the cab because of a ramp up in legacy pension benefits. But conversely, you have to make that commitment to these people that have earned their retirement benefits.
Dan Kaminsky, Cab. Do we have an understanding of what those benefits entail? Is it purely monetary, or is there a health care coverage contingent to that benefit, or anything else?
There is a stipend that's provided to retirees to help them cover their medical insurance once they get on Medicare. And then the rest of it's just a cash payment.
Is that stipend part of what we're talking about, or is that separate?
We'll have to
payout.
ask. I don't know what pool of money the stipend is in. I think it's a separate appropriations because it's not a lot of money.
And they're using income leveling, you're familiar
Well, if it's a
with
stipend, then it's a fixed amount.
Right, but they did increase it this year, so it's not fixed forever.
So if you retire before the age of 62, you're getting income leveling, which is, no, you're not getting income leveling? The people I'm dealing with are.
You
No.
have the option.
Option.
Yeah, not everybody does.
Okay.
And then I have one more question, I promise I'm done. With the 16,000, is there a cost of living that goes along with that? Does the pension board decide any of that?
The Department of Energy has find it very difficult to fund any cost of living.
So no cost of living?
No cost of living.
I don't,
They gave one in 1990. We need the numbers, but it's like 1998.
that would be
Purely
good.
voluntary at that point? Is that what you're saying?
DOE?
Not contractual that you have any COLA? Just
No.
That would be good if we can find out when the last one was,
A long time ago.
and if, I would like to see that as a recommendation too, about how they're planning to implement that, because 20-something years.
They're not.
They're not, that's what we're just asking, if it's not part of the contract, you don't get it.
They can't even pay the pension benefits that they owe now. That's the problem.
So no
I'm not
cost of
saying
living
you're wrong, I mean,
adjustments.
it's just the reality of the situation.
Look at Bobby. Look at Tom, yeah.
So the,
Yeah, no cost of
go ahead, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Bobby Williams Camp. So there are no other DOE sites that receive cost of living raises on their pension?
The DOE employees retired receive a cost of living. And some of the other sites are already at 100% funding. Because their delegations were very proactive in making sure they got plus-ups. And so what the Retirees Association has done is they put a request in to the Congressional Research Office to understand the funding at every site out there. Because it looks like Savannah River is the lowest funded in the whole complex. But we need the evidence
It is.
from a federal.
Yeah, last week I asked, if Savannah River is the only site with this issue,
Across the DOE complex.
across EM.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Bob Dorcap, I mean, therein lies the issue, right?
Yes.
Why didn't Savannah Riverside fund their pension properly? So, that's why we're here.
So I'll just give you my perspective. Other sites did get plus-ups. There are special appropriations to catch up the pension. Our delegation never got a special appropriation for this
Chose not to.
contract.
And it was not an official conversation, so it was, but Savannah River at the time chose not to pursue those for what was told to me and for budgetary concerns, and chose against them. And again, this is, I don't want this to be a, let's go back and look at all the things that we've done wrong. But there was some pretty glaring things that management at the time chose not to do. And some glaring things that management chose to do. And as far as some of the packages that were offered, some of the packages severely cramped and hurt the pension. But they were great for people who got the packages. So I talked to somebody who was actually in the budget office at the time, and really kind of filleted it a little bit and made me uncomfortable. But it is what it is today. There's nothing we can do about it.
Yeah, and I think we've got to be real careful not to go back and
Right.
replow that field. It's been
Thank
plowed
you
a lot
for-
of times.
Yeah, remind me of that.
So, but that's why I think the education is important, so we can understand where the levers are that DOE has control that we can make a recommendation about.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, that actually puts it very well.
Okay.
That's something that we can go back with. I know I've been asking you to define education for me a little bit more, and it's because we need to go back, and if I just said, well, the cab wants to be educated, and the response would be, well, no kidding.
They need
About what? But I like that. What levers can DOE pull that you could have an effect on? So.
Bob Dorcap, James, also, I mean, we don't know the retirement plan, right? The benefits. I mean, maybe Tom does, but we don't know what the retirement plan is put together. We don't know how many people are currently receiving pension retirement benefits. How many future liabilities do they have? Where are they? We see this, estimate from John Lopez that shows like a significant ramp up in pension expenses in the out years, if you will. But then, of course, it recedes again. So that's an educational piece as well. Just explain where we are in terms of people, expenses, obligations, and then when we talk to Buck Associates, you hear about what we should hear about is this is the problems with trying to fund a defined benefit that good on a defined benefit pension plan anymore, and this is why we converted people over to a 401k. Well, that's an educational piece as well, to hear all about that.
Dan.
So some of the immediate concerns I have, and so sorry if I'm kind of jumping out of the agenda, are come and join us and educate us?
Yes.
Is that kind of part of what we're doing right now? So
And
one of the
that's working off this list.
yeah.
Okay.
Right.
You know, some of the things that, you know, I want to come to grips with is obviously the history and the background, and I think we've discussed that. I'd like to know if there's a number already been calculated by Buck or others that a one-time shot or over a 3 or 5 year or 10-year period as a prescribed catch-up.
We got that from Lopez
Okay.
in the last meeting.
So that would be good to go over, and then of course the curve, so we kind of can see the graphical of people going in and unfortunately eventually coming out.
Is that Lopez's? Is that the Lopez's presentation?
Now, this is actually this is the Buck Consultants. And this shows you this is the catch-up over 7 years.
Okay.
And I have the same question you do, Dan, is there a magic button that if we took $350 million and dropped it in next year, could I make that thing level out? That's what I don't really understand.
Okay.
This may be going Dan off of you. You know, last week I got the chance to see the entire EM budget broken down. So I got to see Paducah, I got to see Portsmouth, I got to see all the things, and it really just, I've heard, you know, we hear things and like, are we the only site that has this problem, or this and that? And I started breaking things down by percentages because they love to talk in real numbers. Well, is it, you know, you start looking at Paducah and their budget is $280 million. Well, you hear, if my budget's $280 million and I hear about $80 million, it's a huge deal. Well, $80 million is a ton of money, and I don't mean to make a joke about it, but $80 million to us compared to Paducah is not the same thing. And it really is, I was sitting there, total EM budget $6.5 billion a year. We're talking about 5% of that budget going to our pension. That's what needs to happen. And then I started breaking down the numbers, and I'm looking at it from their standpoint. And then I start looking at, if you just Hanford and SRS, we're at 51 or 52% of the entire EM budget is between our two sites. And Hanford's not having this issue at all. And so, thankfully, it was really kind of weird, and I didn't understand it, but James and Delisa and Earl were saying, when we were there, they talked about Savannah River, the DOE talked about Savannah River more than they normally do. And they talked about all our needs. They mentioned our pension before, they mentioned the pension in brief. They mentioned, you know, the need for new SDUs. They mentioned the needs for getting DWPF up and running, all these things. And then I asked the question, well, why are you cutting our budget then? And so, coming to this meeting today, I'm like, and James asked a very good question at the full board meeting, or somebody did, what is going to be the outcome of this ad hoc committee? What is the recommendation we're going to make, or what's the series of recommendations? And we have to make I think we have to make it very compelling to say, hey, this is what we're talking about, because $350 million dropping it in isn't going to make that big a difference, right? We're still going to have to put in $300 million again and $300 million again. So I hope we come up with something good, because I'm scared and I'm frustrated.
Gil, Bob Dorcap, what was the answer to your question? I mean, you asked a good question. What was the answer?
Well, I kind of stepped in it, Bob. I know you find that hard to believe. I said, I just put it out there. I said, is it just purely political?
Oh, so you asked a question, they didn't answer it.
Well, no. I was quite surprised.
Yeah.
Kind of elaborate a little more on, basically Gil was Earl set the cap. Gil asked the question, and the question was based upon all the contingencies that were set for SRS, but there were other people, let's just for numbers' sake, may have asked for, what, $10 million, and they probably got $20 million. So we were like, how did that happen when we're asking for money to operate and keep everything running at SRS? These people didn't even ask for that amount, but they got in excess of what was asked. And that was the catalyst. And honestly, I think the conversation was going so good, nobody was thinking about it. So everybody was saying, amen, amen. And then when Gil brought the question up, everybody kind of reverted like, wait a minute, man, you're right. They didn't.
7 sites got an increase. 7 sites got more than the money they asked for, and then there was 1 site that got exactly what they asked for, and then there was 2 or 3 of us that got less. Hanford got like a 3% increase. It doesn't matter what sites they were, and I didn't call anybody out in particular. But there was 1 site, and I'll say it in this meeting, Oak Ridge got a 19% increase over what they requested. 19%.
Beyond what they requested.
Beyond what they requested. Now their budget is much smaller. I want to be fair. Their budget's like 300 million, but they got a 19% increase over what they requested.
So that's $50 million.
Yeah, Hanford got, they requested 1.8. They got 2.1. Just things like that. And my question was, why does that happen? Is it purely political? And the budget guy said yes. I was like, wow.
Can I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Bob Dorcap. You know, I pulled out my presentation from John Lopez at the last meeting. And, you know, when he did the legacy pension pro forma, you know, I'm so used to looking at this kind of stuff. You know, I immediately saw this bell-shaped curve, and so I had wrote down, and I had asked the question to John, because the pension funding goes down starting in 2025, can the EM budget for SRS be increased and then decreased? You know, in other words, you have to, like any business, you know, you have to meet your obligations, and then, you know, if it's a for-profit business, then you would, and you can keep that revenue base, then that's profit to you as you decrease expense. But in the government's case, you know, you ramp up to the expense and then you ramp down as the obligation becomes less. I'm not sure that, see, again, that goes back to education too. If we want to talk about a piece, you know, why right at the top level, Gil, why are these other sites getting, on a percentage basis, more appropriations than SRS? You know, because if SRS was getting their fair share of the appropriations, then this pension obligation wouldn't be as severe, arguably, right?
Well, just so you know, they also, this is Tom French, that Hanford got special appropriations that are not in the budget. They increased their budget 3%, but they got like a $300 or $400 million special appropriation that went directly into their pension fund. Many of the sites around the complex did, but since we're only talking about EM, Hanford is one that you can point to. So, well, it is, and we didn't ever get any special appropriations here, and we've got this, I hate to call us aging population, but aging population that are, you know, all coming in to draw on the pension.
All right. Did Hanford experience the turnover of ownership that SRS had with like DuPont and all of that? So that's not a factor. They've had the same.
They split that, you can correct me, but they split the site into multiple contracts, not just two major ones. It's got like 4 maybe.
Did Westinghouse was Westinghouse at Hanford?
Everybody's been to Hanford at one point or the other.
When the DuPont split, I don't know what happened, if it went DuPont directly to Westinghouse like we did or not. I don't know.
So I would have thought that would have made it worse than that. They would have been in a worse situation having gone through multiple.
Well, so you would, but they've had good success with the federal budget.
Dan.
Oh, thanks. So another concern I have, and I've mentioned buyout, but please don't think that I'm pushing that way. There's just some theoretical questions I have with regards to buyout. If a study had been performed, what that buyout would look like. And the reason I bring this up is I've been bought out of, well, I guess it's just one pension. And that being said, when you have a fixed benefit budget with no cost of living increase, no benefits, could you guys stop?
Sorry.
It's distracting.
I'm trying to distract you.
Thank you. You're doing a great job. So when you have a lack of confidence of the budget plan to actually hold their numbers, You have no cost of living increases to look forward to. You have no medical benefits to speak of that are a huge variable within a pension, especially on the benefit side. Many people, not all, but many people would rather take the fate into their own hands, because I would like to see what that buyout would look like, and then that's something that Gil would appreciate as to what that would look like invested more strategically, because the nature of the benefit structured pension is that they're confined by the law of what they can and can't do. They can't do high risk, correct? And not that I'm saying, hey, every pensioner take high risks and roll the dice, but I know if I were in their shoes, that would be one of the options that I would actually like to have on the table, is what would a buyout look like? Take the fate into my own hands, hire my own financial planner, and put the money to work for me, instead of seeing how a fund management board does for me under a whole lot of rules.
So if I can just interject with Tom French, the difference is the DOE can only work on a 12-month cycle. And if you go buy out a pension, you've got to drop $1 billion at one time. So that means they'd have to have a special appropriation for $1 billion to get through Congress. And I don't know if they've done the studies. That's one of the things we need to ask. I think it'd be important to know if they've looked at it. But I think that's to be a big problem. Even retirements, when they have layoffs, they have to be very careful how they do it, because the cost of laying off may exceed the available money, and you can't just go get more money, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're in industry, you bite the bullet, you finance it, get rid of the staff, save the money. But it's not, the department works on the annual budget. And they got to depend on Congress to come through with the funding and not
Good point.
do
Bob Dorcab, I want to, I'm agreeing with Tom too. Dan, your point makes perfectly good sense in a for-profit business environment.
Sure.
You see this all the time, where these legacy pension benefits on a defined benefit pension plan are so onerous for the company, based on the government responsibilities that are imposed on a business to continue with a pension plan. And then, we've got a history now of 20 years of low interest rates, and these pension plans are obligated historically to invest in bonds and not the stock market. So people say, just throw your money in the stock market and you'll make more. Well, that's true, depending on your time horizon and when you do it. When you convert over to these 401k plans and then you engage a financial planner or try to do it yourself, you're subject to market risk. So, if your timing is good, you'll do fine. But that was always the idea behind a defined benefit pension plan, was that you had experts investing the company's profits on your behalf in a pension plan that will, it's like buying an annuity contract with an insurance company. They'll guarantee you this amount of money.
And I've seen buyouts actually structured that way, that from day one you can start payments.
Well, you can. I mean, if you get a
in or outside of retirement age.
If you get an annuity buyout, the first thing you could do is take that lump sum and turn it over to like a company like Penn.
No, but these aren't even
Mutual.
lump sums, Bob. That's why I'm saying there's multiple ways of doing it. Because what you brought up is correct. That if you did a lump sum buyout, you're absolutely correct. That the government's constrained by annual budget, and they need that huge chunk of money to be able to do a buyout. And then that's also an assumption that either all parties are forced into the buyout or that everyone elects to do so. So there's that part of it too, but there's other facets of many structured buyouts where literally you can start having annuity payments, or actually in the flip side, you're paid from day one, starting right then and there.
Well, but that is still an annuity
Right,
with a
just-
contracted amount, and then it's just like a spend down of your
Right.
assets over time.
Well, I was going to recommend that what we do is think about the next meeting, and I think that we could get the experts in here. We can have this discussion for a long time, and it's fun. But I think it'd be really good if we got some people that are really knowledgeable in here to coach us through some of these questions. And I think everybody's been asking really good questions, but we need a little bit more horsepower. So I would propose that we do another meeting in a month. It may be too soon for everybody, but then we can do the education before we get into the Christmas season. Because it'd be very hard, I think, to have a meeting in December.
So are you looking at November?
November,
So I know if we do a Tuesday, the second Tuesday is the CAB full board.
Right, and then the next week is Thanksgiving week.
So we would be looking at the 28th, the 4th Tuesday?
If you were looking at a Tuesday, and we can look at later in the week as well. That whole week is open if there's another day that works better for the group.
I
What
like
day are we looking at, 28th?
Yeah.
I like Tuesdays.
well, I have a board meeting at 4 o'clock on that Tuesday. So I can do it, I can do 6 o'clock again. I mean,
Is that good for you?
Yeah, I may run a little late, but I'll be here.
I mean,
If
Monday.
it's here.
I mean, everything is, not that it matters, everything is good except for Thursday. That Thursday is, but is Thursday your good day? Is Thursday the day you
Thursday would be a great day for me, but that's okay.
I can't do any day but Thursday. I'm giving you 4 to 5.
You're not doing
I
anything on the
understand.
23rd, right?
What's the 23rd?
Thanksgiving?
Is it really? Oh
Hey, I have
gosh.
PTO on my calendar, Guild PTO, Thanksgiving.
so the
So-
28th at 6 o'clock and
28th at 6.
And-
Now, on the off chance that there's something that we can't, get all this together, do you want to look at a date the following week, that first week of December, just to see?
sure.
I guess it would have to be the 6th, wouldn't it?
I can do the week before. I can't do the 28th. There's no
How
way.
about the,
I have a
can
waste
you do the first week in
management
Yeah.
December?
meeting.
Right, you have a meeting
Maybe
on
the
the
first
5th.
week in December is a better week.
We'd have to look at maybe the 6th.
Should we do the 6th?
How's that Wednesday feel?
Wednesday's great.
And we can also look at Monday. I don't necessarily. Yes, yeah, we have
As long as
CAB
it's
meetings on the
scheduled
5th.
quickly.
Committee meetings.
So we'll either
Yeah.
look at Monday the 20th, well, Bob, you said that whole week is out for you, right?
I have a commitment that I've made for 6 months on Monday, the 27th, and Tuesday, the 28th. I
So-
can't, I'm not gonna change that.
It's okay, could we look at the November 29th, December 4th, or December 6th as 3 possibles?
Let's look at December. I think the 4th or the 6th are probably your best bets.
Well, we can't do the 5th.
No, we can't. That's why I said
So
the
I
4th
thought
or
you
the
said the
6th.
4th through the 6th, sorry. So 4th or 6th.
I move that we have it on the 6th.
I agree. Second.
Okay. Everybody okay with the 6th? All right.
For me.
6 o'clock. Are we gonna continue calling this committee the ad hoc committee?
I was thinking that's not a great name.
Yeah.
No, you named it. It's the Balancing the Demands of EM Scope with Pension Funding
What's
Committee.
the acronym? What's that work out?
The damned.
There you go.
And James, as you arrange that, if you want to go back and forth on what specific speakers or whoever,
Oh, yeah, we'll
I
definitely
mean,
be
DOE
pulling
may
that
have
together.
they may have a clear plan of what they want to do.
They really wanted to see from you today kind of what you wanted to do and what your plan was. And I think that you have a good framework going. It seems like getting that information from DOE on who has the hierarchy of control, and then what levers DOE themselves can pull. And that'll give you a really good idea of where you can go next. Because if you know what changes DOE could affect, then that'll give you an idea of where to get some more information. And we had some other topics that some folks have brought up, the number of recipients and future recipients. I know that that information exists. We'll make sure to include that. Long-term federal obligations and a recount of what DOE has done to date, I think will round it out. There's a couple other things here, bullet points from the proposal.
So you're
that
gonna
I
ask
think
all
we'll
the
make sure.
ones?
Maybe not all at once, but yeah, I think are there any bullet points here that we need to strike?
I don't think so, but it would take several meetings, or at least 2 meetings to cover all that.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah, you're not getting all of this done at one time.
With what the conversation was over here earlier, I think it's important that we ask that have asset return assumptions been too high?
Does mortality
Where
rate
is that?
include?
We got into that when we got into that conversation, I've heard some numbers bandied about as what the return assumptions are, and for a pension plan, I think they're kinda high. I just wanna know what
Okay.
the official.
Does the mortality? Oh no. What do you?
Do you know what the assumption rate is? No? Okay. Sorry.
It's okay for you. Can we ask what?
So
For
we'll just
mortality
ask the
rates,
question
does
that
that
they can get that.
include- It's fine. I'm gonna just stop asking that fourth question. Go.
Oh, no, I was just getting Jim's input of,
I
Can you
can't
get
remember
those
what I was
numbers?
asking now.
You were asking about mortality rates?
It's so
Mortality.
long. Does that include spouse?
Does it have a survivor benefit?
Yeah, that's
Yes.
what I wanna know. So then the mortality rate should include spouse then, wouldn't it?
That's up to the pensioner to decide that. You don't just unilaterally say only for the, it's calculated differently depending on what you elect as, for family interest.
Well, they,
Right, exactly.
Yeah, so one of the reasons I ask how they calculated it, if they use blank numbers, statistics, or they use Savannah River numbers. That's why I wrote that in there, so you know if they're counting the spouses.
Okay, can we make sure we have one conversation at a time, because I cannot track both. I promise. So, do you want to finish your thought?
Oh, just, the reason that we put the question in there about how do they calculate the mortality rates, and if they use standard numbers that an actuary would normally use, they go a table. It doesn't account for people who split their pension and their wives, let's say the wives live longer, you have to account for that somehow, right? So the liability doesn't die off as fast as, I hate to put it that way, but,
Right.
it's a much longer obligation.
Okay.
That's why I asked that question.
Bob?
Well, again, there's another education question. See, like, that would lead back to Buck Consultants explaining how they calculate their actuarial estimates to the subcontractors, who then go back to DOE and say, we need this money to pay for our legacy pension benefits, you see. So there's another education piece. We'll eventually get there with Buck Consultants, but I'm just trying to think of a timeline. Next meeting is early December. Tom talked about meetings monthly leading up to, I think the end date of this thing is like March or something like that.
It's May.
Or
Yeah,
May.
till May.
That's it.
So at some point, do we try to get a lot done in education on the first meeting, where we start top all the way down to Buck Consultants, or do we defer Buck Consultants to a future date?
I think we have to look at how the first meeting goes, but if you take all those questions, kind of split them in half arbitrarily, make 2 meetings and say, okay, we're going to be in learning mode for 2 months. And then we can start to refine where can we go, what makes sense. That puts us on a path to May, I think.
Yeah. Is everyone okay with us also, and I don't have a calendar in front of me, but looking at another date in January, perhaps for your follow-up meeting? Because I think you've talked enough here tonight that would really fill a couple of dozen presentations, but we'll see if we can narrow it down some.
it's the 15th and 16th, I'm assuming, right?
Of
January, that third
No,
Monday,
it'll be much
Tuesday?
later. The only reason it's so high up in November is because it's bracketed on each end by Veterans Day and then
So is it-
Thanksgiving.
So it'll be the 22nd and 23rd? Is the third
If it-
Monday is the 15th? And then, I'm sorry, and then the fourth Monday is the 22nd?
Yeah, I think it's the 22nd, 23rd.
So would we want to look at the 29th?
You could
Like
do
that
that, or
week?
you could try to do it before the full board if you wanted to.
let's do
Before
it
the full board?
I was thinking like the week of the 8th through the 12th, is what I was looking at.
As long as
You
it's
want-
not the 10th or the 11th.
You want to tentatively say the 9th? 8th or
Yeah.
9th, depending on.
So Tuesday the 9th?
Okay.
And then Earl, that'll be it for us. We're off budget.
And we're still meeting right back here, right?
We don't know.
We'll see what's available. I know that the 6th is actually available for the DOE Meeting Center, so
Okay.
we'll make sure that we book that room for that. We'll see what's available for 8th or 9th. I don't have that
So
in front of me.
January 9th is what we just said, correct?
Yes.
Tuesday the
But
9th.
we'll send that out. I want to make sure that I got room availability. So we're going to shoot for the 8th or the 9th, depending on what's available.
And then
Yeah,
I
that's
guess
my target.
we need to make sure that the people that are coming to speak, the consultants, that works for them too.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
if that date doesn't work, we'll be just doing this again. Which isn't bad, but
They should have somebody they can send. It's not rocket science.
it seems like rocket science to me. I will tell you. This is past nucleoscience to me.
Nina, someday you'll have to consider retirement, and then you'll be very worried
Just gonna
about
work at
this.
home dead at this point.
All right. So are there any other issues that you need to bring up, you worry that we might run across? Is there something that we need to talk about and identify now?
I don't, this is Tom French, I don't think so, but I know as we go along, we're gonna refocus our efforts because
Yeah.
we're gonna learn a lot more and be a lot smarter.
I think so.
I think you did a really good job of focusing on what we can do.
Bob Dorcap, James, you know, because you're taking notes and you're trying to help us, you're facilitating this meeting. Are we helping you to define what you need?
Oh, I've got a big list.
You sure?
Don't worry.
All right. I mean,
No, I think that
don't,
you know, there's lots of other little things that you have that flesh this out, but there's one thing that I keyed in on, and I mentioned it when Tom said it. What levers can DOE pull? That right there is going to give you the biggest amount of knowledge beyond everything else. The other stuff will help you understand how the pension functions and all of that. That'll be helpful, yes, but understanding the levers that DOE can pull, that is going to help you immeasurably. That'll tell you where to go next and where to follow up after that. That's your rabbit trail that you're going to go down.
So James, is part of that how those special appropriations, those, what did you call them? The
They used to
plus
call,
ups?
they used to
Is
call
there
them pork.
is there a pork? Is that
That's what they used to call them.
I mean, is there a specific process or how you get that allocated?
What has happened in the past is so the only thing that matters in Congress is the appropriations. The bills don't make any difference. It's the appropriations that make a difference. And if your delegation is of a certain mind, what they do is when the bill is getting into committee, comes out of committee to goes to the floor, there'll be a little thing, social development for Hanford or something like that, and it's the rider for the pension. That's how that happens.
So write your congressman.
Yeah.
Let them know how you feel.
What's going on right now, and
Gil.
Dave explained pretty well, is there's an appeal process, and right now, Savannah Riverside is in the appeal process to the Hill. I don't know exactly where, but, and so DOE is going there and saying, listen, and this is what they told me last week, they're going with the Savannah River, they're going, hey, you know, this is what, we weren't joking around, this is what we need. And so this is the first step of trying to get it fixed. That's what they're in the process of that literally this week.
And
John Lopez told us about it a little bit at the last meeting, and I understand a little bit better now.
But the Retirees Association has been communicating with Joe Wilson and Lindsay's office for years. Joe Ortaldo's been part and party to that. Let everybody know what the needs are. It's getting worse. Now it's getting to a crisis. So.
Bob Dorcap, though, I see again, you know, this is interesting listening to Gil and to Tom. If I'm going to serve in this committee, I'd like to be brought up to speed on those issues as well. You know, what's been happening. You know, just get a good baseline on, you know, like DOE, or excuse me, SRS is appealing to DOE for more money. Well, I don't know that for a fact. I mean, I just would like to hear more about that as part of this education, because this, again, my opinion, this whole thing is all about money. And if you have enough money, you're going to pay for the pension, you're going to pay for the scope of work. So if DOE, SRS gets what they need, then the pension issue goes away. Well, you'll have your pension properly funded, and you'll have your scope of work properly funded. So that may be part of the shell game is, you know, now that sounds like an issue for the CAB, SRS CAB is, you know, we want our, you know, we're representing SRS, and we want to make sure this location gets their fair share. And that issue's come up in the past with other boards. You know, we've been on this thing, Earl, Nina, myself, 6 years, and I've heard that before. So are we getting our fair share? So, you know, If we can help SRS, DOE get that fair share, then what do we need to do that?
I have one more concern. Since we're kind of in a fact-finding mode and educating ourselves to make ourselves completely dangerous, by the time we're educated, we're losing 3 people that are here tonight. No matter what, we lose 3 people tonight.
That's so horrible.
It does sound horrible because we're going to invest a lot of knowledge into the 3 of you, and then who your successors end up being will be coming in a little bit cold.
So we can give them our notes. Okay, so maybe
Well-
can we invite other?
Well, that's my only concern, that maybe I realize we can take a very calm pace, but what else can we do? I mean, what more can we do as an ad hoc committee to get beyond the education phase as quickly as possible?
Are we able
So-
to do anything? Email?
So, before we, I'm going to say something, then we're going to have to hit our public comment period at 7:05. To address your continuity question just a little bit, keep in mind that we do record these, so on top of the summary and any notes you may produce and discussions that you may have beyond that, the presentations you hear will live on in posterity forever and ever, amen. They're going to be available for the newcomers to come in and watch and catch up, hopefully, and receive that same information. So with that, can we hold on to your thought? It's 7:05. We have a scheduled public comment. Are there any public comments? Joe?
You guys all know me. Oh, you gotta go to the mic, Joe. I'm Joe Ortato, member of the public. Full disclosure, I am on the board of directors of the Retiree Association, but I'm speaking as a retiree and I'm speaking for the board. But I think you guys are on the right track. I'm sure you've come to the conclusion, since you've been on the board, that the Savannah River site is, if it's not the best, it's one of the best performing sites in the complex. I wouldn't say it's the best, but it's certainly in the top 1 or 2, there's no doubt in my mind. I think you're right, and as you get all this information you're asking for, and I think you're all on the right track, you don't want to emphasize the past, because when this happened, nobody's around that was involved with it directly. That's at different companies, or different people in headquarters, or different people on the site. So get the information, understand how the site got to where it is, and then move on from that point. The very segments you're bringing up and talking about and getting the information on, try to bring in comparing what the status of the other sites are as you address whatever the issue is. For instance, we talked about what's the status of the pension funds. Well, Savannah River site's 80%. It's been there for years, just fluctuating. It was 100% not too many years ago. What are the other sites today? My understanding is most of them are pretty close to 100%. And that's a key thing, I think, if you're going to influence DOE and whatever you're going to recommend, comparison to other sites is going to be a key factor on that. Another thing. When the contract changes, there are a lot of good discussions about that. And when a contract changes, you might want to ask DOE to give you a little bit of a summation of what happens, because contract change 101, in my opinion, you get a couple dozen people at the top leave, a couple dozen people come in, everybody else gets interviewed by the new chain, and 99+% of the people do the same thing the next day as they did the before day. So a lot of the jobs are very unique, and nobody else can do them. So when a contract change, you don't see a big mass change of people on the site. And a lot of the people that are retired, they say, the contract's changing. The color of our check's going to change. So in a lot of ways, particularly since after DuPont left, DuPont was there for, 30-some years. People worked for DuPont. But ever since then, the contracts change every 4 or 5 years or whatever. And people are thinking more and more, hey, we work for DOE. And that's in the back of the minds of a lot of the folks, particularly the guys that have been there a long time and the guys that have been retired. And they're the folks, the ladies and gentlemen, who actually got the Savannah River site to where it is. They're the ones that performed for 50-some years out there, meeting the deadlines and getting the DWPF started up and delivering the tritium, delivering the plutonium and everything else on the schedule that they got. But I thank you guys for doing this. I mean, I think this is important. I think you can help the retirees. And where we'll go, you'll see where you go as you learn what's going on and see what you can do. And retirees, we appreciate what you're trying to do for us. Thanks.
Thanks, Joe.
Bob Dorcab, thank you, James. I just want to, and I appreciate Joe's comments too. He's got a lot of history, both with the CAB and SRS, and I always listen when Joe talks. I want to go back to this issue of, let's see, we were talking about the changeover in 2018. You know, this current committee is with the CAB members that are on, and you know, in 2018 we're going to have change. You know, like there's 3 people that are going to get off. I had some thoughts about what this ad hoc committee should be doing in terms of the full board. I had one bullet. We have a chair, and it's normal for the committee, action-based committee's chairman to make a report to the full board at the full board meetings. So I'm going to suggest that Tom French make a be on the agenda for the November meeting, and he just simply makes a report about what's going on with this ad hoc committee.
You were on it already, trust me.
Okay.
That's good. That's a good thought.
And then, you know, this year the CAB support changes over. You know, they changed their agenda. They said, well, the presenters will be at the full board meeting, and the committee meetings will be more for discussion. But yet this ad hoc committee, what I've been hearing is we're going to have presentations at the committee level, and I'm not saying that the presentation should be only at the full board level, but perhaps because of the special nature of this committee is that if we have a committee, if there's a presentation at the committee level, that it also gets presented to the full board, because then what you would do is you would start educating the other CAB members who didn't volunteer to be on this committee, so that, you know, when 3 people come off, you would have an opportunity to get some other people up to speed and maybe perk up their interest. That's just a suggestion. And then the last bullet point I had was recognize the transition in 2018 of the full board. You know, in other words, don't wait until January to say, oh, well, there's 3 guys getting off this committee, now we need somebody. Start talking about it in November. You know, hey, we got a committee, Tom's going to make a presentation, we're scheduling presentations, but hey, full board, if you have any, you know, you may not have had interest in the past, but maybe you have interest now, and you might get, you might get some more candidates who would take our place.
But it's based on committees. So the committee chair, if somebody rolls off the committee chair, that committee would put somebody up or nominate themselves. So.
Well, committee representation is elective by the people on the CAB board. They don't. The committee chair doesn't pick who gets on the committee.
No, but the committee chairs picked who would be on this committee, is what he means. If y'all remember it in Charleston, all the chairs went around the room and
the other
picked.
chairs picked other people.
I was a committee chair for strategic and legacy management. I just simply asked the committee members, are there any volunteers? And when nobody offered, I volunteered myself.
Which is good, but that's how you know you're going to roll off. And
well,
the
all I'm saying is,
takes your job.
however you want to handle it, all I'm suggesting is that you don't just we don't just wait until 3 members come off. You could, you know, say we have 3 members that will be rolling off in January. We see the scope of work for this committee going beyond the terms of some of the board members or the committee members. So we're going to keep asking, you know, in November, and then we have another meeting in January. There's 2 opportunities to kind of recruit more committee members for this committee.
I think you raise a good point, Bob, that continuity issue comes into play, and you want to make sure that you keep everybody abreast, the whole board. So we'll take a look at how we need to work the work plan and presentations at the full board versus this committee, what it is that we need to do. But also keep in mind too, when you're talking to your fellow cab members, remind them that these presentations, if they don't, turns out that we're only able to do them here, there are online, and it's not that difficult to do a little bit of homework and watch the presentations and get up to speed on the topics and hear the discussion. And then we can make sure that we have the subject matter experts in the room at the full board meeting, so if the rest of the board members have follow-up questions, if that's the direction that we end up needing to go.
Bob Dorcap again. See, that's where, I made that note about, we do things differently now. We have the presentations at the full board level that are under the committee's scope.
Right.
But this committee would be different than that. This committee's saying, we're going to get presentations no one else is going to know about. So all I'm saying is that, consider the...
I understand your
consider
concern there,
that,
yeah.
you might want to redundantly do the presentation 2 times, that's all. Just so that the full board really understands that this isn't just an opportunity for a few of us to meet and have a good time, that we're doing some work.
I'd make one comment. I think having the slides available and the subject matter experts available, we're going to be doing like 5 hours of in-depth discussions, and if you plop that into a board meeting, you've destroyed 1 day of the board meeting for all the other committees. So we want to have the information. I just don't want to completely disrupt the whole calendar.
That'll be some back-end stuff
Yeah.
that we'll take a look at and see what it is that we need to do. I don't think it's something that we need to
Worry
delve
about
too hard
tonight.
into
Could
right now.
have it as part of his recap.
Absolutely. That's that same kind of information. There's multiple ways that we can go about it. Keep in mind, this is an ad hoc committee chartered to investigate the issue, and part of that investigation is learning. And if it turns out that you go to the full board with something at the end, we'll make sure that everybody has the information needed to make sound judgments on the recommendations that you put forward. Don't concern yourselves too much about that. Concern yourselves as a committee on what it is that you need to investigate so that you can report to the full board where you think the cab as a whole needs to go. Does that make sense? Okay. Okay. Are there any other follow-ups? Are y'all done already?
We're done already.
Y'all got like 3 more hours. What do you want to do? I'm kidding. Tom, do you want to close it out for us? This is your committee now.
So what do I do to officially close it out?
Oh, you
Put
can,
your hands in the middle, break.
you can just declare us adjourned if everybody else is done.
If there are no other comments, let's adjourn until next time.
Great, thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.